Okay, in this set of videos, we are going to be focused on the circulatory system, the blood vessels, and how the blood circulates, which we started a little bit in the heart lectures, but we will go into more detail here. This first video is probably just going to get through arteries, and then subsequent videos will be after that. Just to review a couple things before you get going, and at some points in the notes it'll say to brush up on this or brush up on that, but all of these are going to be revisited. So they're topics that you've learned about before, but will come back up during this portion. So again, I would think the one to help the most might be page 728, the systole and diastole. Also the membrane transport, because we'll be talking about diffusion. Okay, so this is going to start off with all general anatomy of the blood vessels. We're going to look at each type of blood vessel in particular, but this general anatomy, these layers get referenced quite a bit. So if we look, all vessels have these similar layers, but we'll be talking about them separately. So arteries are vessels that carry blood away from the heart. Veins carry blood towards the heart or back to the heart, and then capillaries are what is connecting the smallest arteries to the smallest veins. And when we get into each category, arteries and veins, you'll see that there are smaller versions. They're not all just arteries. So, but that picture above is showing kind of our layers there. So the artery is on the right-hand side, and then it lists the interna, the media, and the external layers. So those layers will be referenced, so it might be helpful to have that picture sketched out in your notes to help you remember each of those layers. Although those layer names are pretty easy to remember: inside, in the middle, and then outside. So the vessel wall of all blood vessels, here comes those layers. The tunica interna is the lining of the blood vessel. That layer is what is exposed to the blood. It's composed of simple squamous epithelium back from tissues. It also has a basement membrane of loose connective tissue, and that is what makes up that layer. It is a selectively permeable barrier. It helps decide what should be absorbed or what should not be. Okay, so it does secrete chemicals as well that can stimulate dilation or constriction, so the vessel getting larger or smaller. The endothelium does normally repel blood cells and platelets, so it tries to have those blood cells just move on by, not get stuck. If they do get stuck, that's when we start talking about a blood clot forming. But sometimes the tissue around the vessel can be inflamed, and so then there's some cell adhesion molecules that are produced by the endothelial cells and want those white blood cells, the leukocytes, to adhere to the surface. Now this part is going to make more sense when we go into detail about the types of blood cells, but basically when there is an inflammation and we need white blood cells to get there, these cell adhesion molecules are produced. The middle layer is called the tunica media. It is a layer of smooth muscle, also collagen and elastic tissue. It's what allows vessels to be strong, and so they can withstand the blood pressure that they are dealing with, especially the arteries. Okay, then the outermost layer is the tunica externa. It's made of loose connective tissue. It kind of merges with the neighboring blood vessels or nerves or other organs that are right next door. It does anchor the vessel, kind of giving it some stability, and also provides passage for nerves and lymphatic vessels. Okay, here's an up-close picture of the different types of vessels, arteries and veins, and how those vessel walls differ in each of those types of arteries and veins and capillaries as well. Arteries sometimes can be called resistance vessels. They are much stronger They have a resilient tissue structure, again, to resist that high blood pressure. The biggest arteries are called conducting arteries, the aorta, of course, being the biggest, the common carotid artery, subclavian, pulmonary trunk, and the iliac arteries. Those are the biggest ones. Again, when we get into the dissection and in the lab, you will find out where all of those are and see that they are the largest. The next category of arteries are the kind of medium-sized arteries. They're called distributing. They distribute blood to specific organs. They are branching from those larger arteries, and they also have smooth muscle layers that are 3/4 of the wall thickness, so they're very muscular. And when we go smaller from there, they're called small arteries or resistance arteries. And from here, sometimes they're called arterioles. They control the amount of blood to various organs. They help kind of distribute the blood where it needs to go. So they have a thicker tunica media in proportion to their lumen. The lumen is the opening inside. And they have a very thin or small tunica externa. From there, getting even smaller is called meta-arterioles. They are short little vessels that link arterioles to capillaries, and they have a little valve-like structure called a precapillary sphincter. It's kind of an opening where it allows blood into the capillary bed, and it controls the amount of blood that goes there. The constriction of these reduces or shuts off the blood flow, but then when they're open, the capillaries are receiving blood. When they're closed, the blood is diverted and goes to other tissues. And there's kind of a picture of, on the left, the arteriole, and then those little branches are the capillaries, and then those kind of little round circles are those precapillary sphincters, and that is what is kind of opening and closing to allow blood into or not into the capillaries. An aneurysm is a weak point in the artery or in the heart wall. The artery can have that weak point, and there can be a sac that bulges and could potentially rupture. Normally we see this in the abdominal aorta, the renal arteries, and the arterial circle at the base of the brain. These aneurysms, the cause of them is from arteriosclerosis, it's a mouthful, and hypertension, and they can cause pain because there's too much pressure on other structures, and eventually can rupture. This comes from weakness of the blood vessels. It could be from trauma, also could be from bacterial infections.